All right, so friends, let me tell you what's going on. The whole Lubavitch is up in arms. Whole Lubavitch is on fire. What's Lubavitch on fire about? So, here, it passed me, the Kuntres in front of you. Just give me one. This. Okay, so what is this? Printed in the tens of thousands, everybody is learning. So, as you know, the previous Rebbe instructed before he passed away on the 10th of Shvat, 1950. It was a week before. He calls in our Rebbe, his youngest son-in-law, who was put in charge of all the main institutions that he established, including the Lubavitch printing house. It's called Kahos. And said, I want you to publish for this Shabbos a discourse, a mimer of mine. Now, this discourse he had said and written decades earlier in 1934. As it turns out, that was in Riga in 1934, and that discourse was the first or the second discourse that our Rebbe heard from his future father-in-law. Wasn't engaged yet. His father-in-law to be is the first time he saw the previous Rebbe. He came to him to Riga. And that's the one he's choosing.
The Rebbe got married in 1927.
Rebbe got married 27. I'm sorry, this is 1920, did I say 34? 24. 1924. This is 3 years earlier. 1924. Tav Reish Pei Dalet. So, good, that's it. Publish it. And he publishes it. It was in the manuscript. It had been said back then in Riga, but was never published. And it's published, and it turns out that's the Shabbos that the previous Rebbe passes away. So it turns out that he asked, publish this discourse in connection with my passing. That's what happened. Now we look at that discourse, and I want to tell you how it begins. Because there are extraordinary, allusions is too weak a word, expressions of how this discourse is, in fact, the transition from his generation to the new generation. And it begins like this. Like every Hasidic discourse, it begins with a quote from Scripture. The quote is, Basi legani achoisi kala. It's the opening verse of chapter 5 of the Song of Songs. The whole Song of Songs is a metaphor composed by King Solomon, describing a man and woman, husband, wife, fiance, and what's the other word? Fiance and male, female, whatever it is. Right, chas and kala. And it's describing their relationship. That's all a metaphor for us and God. God's the groom, we're the bride, etc. So the verse reads, I'm going to take you through this, listen carefully. I have come to my garden, to my sister, the bride. It's all metaphors. Obviously, without going deeper, we know who's talking to whom. God is coming to the garden, whatever that means, we'll see in a second. My sister, the bride, that's us. Right? That the whole metaphor is the male is God and the female is us. That's the verse. So that discourse, the previous Rebbe says, it is written in the Medrash, and he quotes the Medrash for us. What's the meaning of this verse? What's it referring to? The Medrash, our sages, like the Talmud, explains all the verses in this, almost all of them, in Song of Songs, and what they're metaphors for, what they're talking about. So the Medrash notes like this. It doesn't say I've come to the garden, to my sister, the bride. Just parenthetically, you can't marry your sister, the bride. So just parenthetically, this is also addressed in the Maimer, in the discourse. Our relationship with God is multifaceted. We're his daughter, we're his sister, we're his bride, we're his wife, and even his mother. And that's how it is on our physical plane as well. Your wife is more than just your wife. There's many dimensions. She's friend, she's lover, she's sister, she's daughter, and even nurture a mother. We're pretty much one-dimensional. A guy is pretty simple. It's pretty simple. What he wants and what he needs, we can make in 3 lines. Even 1 line's enough. Very simple. But a woman is multi-textured and multi-layered. And he needs all of that too. So that's what it says here. I'll come to my garden, my sister, the bride. That's because there's an element in marriage which is a sister. She's an equal, a sibling. So all kinds of dimensions, which we're not addressing the sister thing now. We're addressing the early part of the verse. My garden, not the garden. Now, what's the difference if you say, I'm coming? If you're going to say, you're going to tell a story. I came to the garden or I came to my garden. It's a very big difference. To the garden, it's the first time you're going. Yours, you have no connection to it. You came to a garden, you came to the park. You met her in the park. You come to my garden means that's yours. You were there once, you left, and now you're coming back. Says the Medrash. That's the meaning here. So what's the meaning? So I'm going to take you to the end and back it up. The meaning of the verse is God's referring to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai in general, and specifically the building of the Mishkan that followed soon after by God's instruction. That's what's meant by my garden as opposed to the garden. Explains the Medrash. In the beginning of creation, God's presence was revealed on earth in the Garden of Eden. But then seven sinful generations that pushed me back, banished me from one heaven to the other, all the way to the seventh generation. To list them, we're familiar with them all. First sin was Adam and Eve, 1. Second sin was Cain and Abel, 2. Third sin was Enosh. Enosh was someone who began to profane the name of God. Next sin was the generation of the flood. Next sin was the generation of the Tower of Babel. Next sin was the sinful generation of Sodom. Let's just read the story in Chumash. And then the Egyptians in the time of Abraham, kidnapping Sarah and corrupt. 7 generations. And the divine presence is now in heaven number 7. 7 heavens? I mean, 7th heaven. The expression comes from Judaism, from Torah, from here, from this Midrashic commentary. So God's banished from Adam till Abraham. There were 7 sins that pushed me further and further away. But then the message continues, and then there rose 7 tzaddikim, and each one successively drew me back closer to the world. And here they are. Avram, his son Yitzchak, 2. His son Yaakov, 3. His son Levi, 4. His son Kohas, 5. His son Amram, 6. Moshe, 7th. Now, 7 sinful, 7 righteous, and the 7th generation, Moshe Rabbeinu, drew me back to the world. Through him I gave my Torah, and he built the Mishkan, the home for me where I resided once again on earth. And that's the meaning. I've come to my sister, my garden, the bride. My garden was once here. You banished me, and now I'm back. That's the beginning of that discourse. Obviously, the connection to the transition, his passing, and the new generation is so powerful because he was the 6th generation from the founder of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe. And he's passing away, and that's going to the 7th. And he emphasizes all 7th are beloved. 7th day of the week, Shabbos is beloved. The 7th, Moshe Rabbeinu is beloved. The 7th year in the sabbatical year is beloved, and many other 7s are beloved. So we see the powerful indication, number 1. Number 2, and this is the primary thing, a year later, when the Rebbe formally accepted the mantle of leadership, he resisted it for a whole year. As we told you last week, that's the hallmark of true leadership, is when you don't want to be a leader. Not when you vie for it and you campaign for it. That's not a true leader. I'm just going to tell you an interesting thing, that our sages say that there's a famous section in Tractate Sota that describes what the world will be like before Mashiach comes. The insolence the younger generation will have. Parents will be afraid of their kids. They're afraid the kids are going to be, they're trying to appease the kids all the time and be their buddies. It's one description. Another is that the face of the generation, the leaders of the generation will be like the face of a dog. Pnei hador ke pnei hakelev. What does that mean? They look like a dog. So one of the explanations is, if you notice, maybe you have a dog, I don't know, you walk your dog, The dog walks ahead. So the observer is watching. So who's leading who? The dog. The dog is walking ahead. But the dog looks around to see where the master is going, and then he goes. The leaders don't lead. They just want to appease the constituency. What do you want? We'll tailor my campaign to you want. That's all it is. Just say what they want to hear. That's not leadership. That's the meaning of the leaders would be like dogs. They'll walk ahead, but they're not leaders. They're not charting a new course. They're saying what you want to hear. Back to our discussion. What were we saying now? The last thing we just said. So the seventh generation, yeah, so a true Jewish leader resists. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, our Rebbe. Oh, so I was saying, so the inaugural Farbrengen a year later, when the Rebbe indicated that he's accepting their leadership, the main indication was that he said a Hasidic discourse, a maimer that only a Rebbe can and does say. But he also made a statement. The Rebbe has a sense of humor, and he said, in America, they like statements, and the more bombastic, the better it is. The more shocking it is, the more, that's advertisement. It's all built on shock, value, get your attention. So like he says, you want a statement? I'm going to make a statement. He didn't say those words, but you can hear the tape, him saying it, and kind of smiling while he's saying it. And he hears the statement. So this is the statement that Rebbe is saying that inaugurates his leadership of the seventh generation. So he says there are three loves: the love of God, the love of Torah, the love of your fellow Jew. And they're all inseparable. You can't have one without the other. So if someone says, he said, he loves God, he loves Torah, but he doesn't love his fellow Jew, some yes, some not, then his love of God and Torah is not true. And moreover, he says, since they're all interlinked, each one, if you love truly, will lead to the other. And basically, he said, we're putting the emphasis on love your fellow Jew. That's where it starts. And that will lead to love of God, love of Torah. And actually didn't say this, but elsewhere he once did, quoting the previous Rebbe. They asked the Alter Rebbe, what is greater, love of God or love of your fellow Jew? What is greater? You think it's, of course, love of God. Alter Rebbe said, no, love of your fellow Jew. Because what's true love? I love not just you, but what you love. What's precious to you is precious to me. That's the true love of you. I could love you, but what you love, I'm not interested. You. But if I really embrace you, whatever's precious to you is precious to me. Since God loves every Jew, you love every Jew. So you're not just loving God, you're loving what God loves. That's even deeper. You follow that? So that was the big statement, the three loves. And it's a big statement then, because this is right after the war, and Judaism was polarized. There was the frum communities and the non-frum. And the frum communities stuck together. They were Williamsburg and Borough Park, Crown Heights, or whatever. And the rest of Jewry, did what they did. And there was, we understand it was kind of survival. America's a big threat. We've got to stay close together and create very protective environments for our kids. There's not the shtetl anymore. So the attitude of Orthodox Jewry overall, period, was to go internal. And the Rebbe said, no, we're going that way. There was a big shock. Going this way, not this way. But anyway, so that was the first Farbrengen. But here's the main thing, maybe. It's all tied together. We are the seventh generation. Rebbe cried when he said this, not by our choice. And maybe we don't even want it. But it's given to us. And we should know that the greatness of the seventh generation is because it comes after the previous generations. Because 1, 2, 3, 4 are all invested in us. And we have been empowered, our generation, like Moshe Rabbeinu, to bring the divine presence back to earth. This time, the end of exile, 3,000 plus years later, forever. That's the boom. That's when it started, the mission statement of our generation, to bring Mashiach and bring the divine presence down to earth. And we will do it, and we're empowered. Now I want to lead you to something very, very powerful and specific. The previous Rebbe in the discourse is 20 chapters. Towards the end of the discourse, talks about the following. He said there are two kinds of wars in halacha. There's a war of expansion, just to expand the borders of Israel, a war to get acquire treasures, to acquire resources. That's one kind. It's not a mandated war; it's a permissible war, and it has its limitations. The first limitation is you don't engage it unless you know you're going to win, because it's not a matter of survival. It's a question of expansion. It's a question of getting resources. Okay, and there's many limitations. That's one kind of war. It's a calculated war. It's a war only based on profit. If you're not going to win, you don't start, and you know you're going to win. Then, this is the game. Good, but then there's a war when the very state is threatened. There's an opposition that seeks to destroy you, and they're going to. If you let them, they will. So this war is a very different war. For in halacha, the first war, a lot of exemptions. You just got married, you're exempted. The second war, there's no exemptions. Everybody is enlisted. This is survival. And more than that, here's the key thing. The king has treasures that he amassed personally and his forebears amassed. Now, these treasures, this oitzer, no one ever, not on display, no one ever sees them. But for this war, for the very raison d'etre of the state and the survival of the state is at stake, the king opens the treasures and he instructs the officers, the ministers, squander it, buy, get whatever you need to empower the soldier on the ground, whatever weapon, whatever it is, to achieve victory. There are no bars held, and everything is given. In the end, even in the final throes of the battle, the king himself goes out and puts his life on the line. When this is no option here. There must be total victory because the other side seeks our obliteration. Says the Rebbe, previous Rebbe, this is our generation on many levels. We are the final battle to bring Mashiach, and quite literally, we're facing existential threats. They talk the obliteration of Israel, and it starts there. And then every Jew worldwide, this is quite literal. For this, we are given the treasures that no generation before us had. No generation before us had. Now, what exactly is this treasure? You and I'm going to offer an explanation based on the discourse. It's not so explicit, but you and you should know this. No generation before is being given the treasure that you have and I have to achieve the victory, and it's an assured victory. What is it? So I'm going to tell you. It seems. The Talmud says like this. It's a famous statement. Hakoil b'dei shamayim chutz me'yira shamayim. It's a Talmud in Masech, Tractate Brachas, which means everything, God has everything.
Sam just asked you about this in Shul. Sam.
Yeah. God has everything. God, creator of the world, he has everything except for one thing. One thing he doesn't have. The fear of heaven. Our choice. In other words, God granted us free choice to do the right thing, fear of heaven, or the selfish thing, the sinful thing. That's something he granted us. And that's not something he dictates. He doesn't have it. Doesn't have our choice. Doesn't have our piety. We have to give it. So when a Jew serves God, especially with sacrifice, says the Talmud, that's his treasure. That's what he amasses. The Mesiras Nefesh, the sacrifice, when facing temptation, when a Jew does the right thing, that's what God, each mitzvah of God is amassing. That's the only thing he has in his treasure that he gets, a treasure he gets from somewhere else, that he gets from us. Otherwise, he has it to begin with. He controls it all. Clear? Hakol b'dei shemaim chutz me'yira shamayim. That's God's. So we just learned something now. What's God? What's his treasure chest? What does he have there? He has there the sacrifice and the devotion of every year. That's precious by him. It's not something he's going to dictate. We've got to do it through our free choice. And that's our gift. which he amasses of the generation. Here's the thing. When it comes to the last generation, it's only true of you and I, because we're the seventh generation, we're the last generation. This is a war of not expansion, this is survival. This is Mashiach or not, redemption or not, If you think about this, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, this is a battle over what's the truth. This is religious. It's religious, it's physical, it's the battle for who's the devil and who's evil and who's light and darkness. They claim we're dark and they're light, and we're saying we're light and they're dark, and that's a clash. This is a clash of civilizations, of ideology that on the most profound level. Filtered into the universities everywhere. This is a global battle. Ideological and physical. Sydney, Hanukkah. So what have we been given? No generation got this. Till now, it looked like this. You lived in a certain time, you served God, you had your sacrifice, God treasures it and it keeps it, and you'll be rewarded for it one day. Beautiful. This generation invested in you and I is all the sacrifice of all the previous generations. No one got this before. It's not just little you and me. You're like, oh, man, nobody or nothing. What can I do? Invested in me is my father, my Zayd, my Elder Zayd, going back to Abraham. All the sacrifice and the stories and the heroism and the mitzvahs that they did. There's all their choices. They all did it through sacrifice. For the power of that is given to you and I. And that makes us invincible. We're little people, but invested in us is all of Jewish history. That was never true before. Each generation was its own. We're getting it all. And you have to know this. You have to know this, and we face a temptation or any question in life, and how can I do this? You just have to know. Maybe I couldn't, but it's not me. Invested in me is. And that's the emes. That's the truth. That's the treasure of the seventh generation that we have. And in the face of this, there can be no obstacle, and we are absolutely assured of victory. An example that's given in Chassidus is a dwarf or small person, or a child, on top of the shoulders of a giant, an adult. So who sees further? Where's a higher vantage point? The child. But why? Because someone riding on the shoulders. So we're riding on the shoulders of previous generations. It has to be thought about. It's not this little Stephen, little Moshe and you, there's Jeff, running around this world, little me. Invested in every one of us is God's treasure that he amassed over the generations, the sacrifice, the soul, the connection of every Jew through all of history is in me and in you. We're invincible. In the face of this, the world cannot offer any resistance. That's all we need to summon. In simple language, what's required today is I am a Jew, and I'm not just a little Jew. I am the Jew of history. The eternal Am Yisrael Chai, that's who I am. And therefore I don't budge and don't compromise. And the world in the face of that is, wow. The eternity, in simple language again, the eternity of the Jewish people is invested in me and in you. We just have to embrace it and live it, and redemption comes.